Hi there, and welcome to another episode of World Beyond Belief. My name is Paul Marco, and I'm going to be your host for this entire episode. You'll also be hearing a female voice, which is that of Mindy Erkin, who often helps me with these podcasts. Now, this particular podcast is pretty dark. Maybe this could be a trigger warning. I started thinking about this head chopping phenomenon that we seem to be experiencing here in the beginnings of the 21st century. You know, all through my life, I never heard about head chopping. Yes, when you read about the French Revolution, you learn about guillotines, but lately, there's been a lot of head chopping and a lot of information and a lot of focus on head chopping. And I started to think of how that could be and why that could be. And as I got deeper and deeper into the research on this topic, it got darker and darker. So, but I think in the darkness, there's some lessons to be learned. Okay, so if you're up for it, we're going to get into the topic of head chopping and finally into the answer to the question, what's eating you? Now, beheading seems to be a favorite of the Muslims. And since Muslims are now a prominent feature of Western culture, that's probably one of the reasons why it's really up in our face now. According to an article entitled Christ, Muhammad, and the Culture of Beheading, the Prophet himself beheaded over 900 in one setting. Now, I would imagine he was using some of his followers because that would be a lot of chopping for one prophet. In Sharia law, beheading is big, but also they do severing of other body parts like your hands, and stoning is big, but it's mostly for women. Now, doing this research, I did find one interesting article. I just found this article. It's called Head Chopping Classes for Muslim Children. So we're attempting to pass on this practice. In Raqqa's training camps, ISIS teaches children how to behead Christian infidels. Boys say their instructors show them how to decapitate blonde, blue-eyed dolls with kitchen knives. This summer, in his hometown of Raqqa, 13-year-old Mohammed was forced to attend a children's training camp established by the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, sponsored by the U.S., of course, and NATO. When his father opposed his son's conscription, ISIS fighters threatened to kill him. Mohammed left for camp, which his father describes as a form of, quote, brainwashing the children. After his return, the mother says he was surprised to find in his bag a blonde, blue-eyed doll, along with a large knife given to her son by ISIS supervisors. When she confronted Mohammed, he told her that the camp manager had distributed the dolls and asked that the children decapitate them using the knife, and that they were asked to cover the dolls' faces when they performed the decapitation. It was his homework. Practice beheading a toy likeness of a blonde, white Westerner. Now, this is a horrible article, and it was shocking to me, and I'm sure it's shocking to you. But you have to remember that people that are following Islam or any religion are subject to whatever the beliefs are encapsulated in that religion. And in a way, they're all victimized by that too. We have to remember because, after all, in the final analysis, it'll be all of us joining together to throw off the oligarchs. And I'm sure these little guys that are sitting there with bandanas on their head, learning to behead blonde baby dolls, are as innocent as anybody. And then there's the guillotines, rumored to be in the FEMA camps. Initially, I thought this was for intimidation. I thought that was the whole reason to make guillotines. And I was partially right. But actually, looking further into it, they're a labor-saving device. What was happening was if you have to do several beheadings in one day and you're there with a knife and your arms get tired and there's some horrible accounts about mishaps in beheadings. So it was efficient, and actually, what's interesting was people that were the beheaders, the executioners. It was a family business, and it was passed down from father to son, and they prided themselves on the efficiency. In other words, how many they could get done, how many they could get in and out in one day. So actually, the guillotine was only partially for intimidation, and partially for efficiency. Victor Hugo said that, quote, one can only have a certain indifference on the death penalty as long as one has not seen the guillotine with one's own eyes. And you can see this one sitting right here. They are pretty scary looking devices. Now in Europe, the last execution by guillotine was done in France in 1939, but surprisingly, in a time when we should be looking at rehabilitation, training, and reasons why criminals' acts are committed, we wax draconian. The state of Georgia has just legalized killing by guillotine for official, executions for the state. Now, why do you think they would do that? I mean, in an age where, so many things are possible, why we would go back to, 16th century device to perform executions. Now, some say that there are guillotines in the FEMA camps and restraining devices. Now, I've never seen any incredible evidence on that, but there are some people, eyewitnesses, that will attest to that fact. I don't know about the guillotines, but I do know about the FEMA coffins. All right, let's take a little closer look. This looks like an advertising brochure. Introducing the Hercules, a polymer vault engineered to a higher standard, utilizing nature's captured air principle for double protection. Double protection against what? We don't know. Okay, engineered for convenient storage with nesting and stacking capability, engineered to be non-biodegradable, incredibly easy to attach to the dome, is incredibly easy to attach to the base, engineered with a 180-degree reinforced channel edge. Wow, 100-year warranty. And then you've got the complete unit weighs 136 pounds. This blew my mind. I didn't know they were this heavy. And that's the dome only. This is a really interesting piece because I'm really curious what they're going to use this for. Now, ostensibly, they're going to use it as caskets. But, I'm not a mass murderer. But I've never heard of a mass murderer loading in a bunch of caskets for their victims. From what I've seen on newsreels, basically what a mass murderer does is they'll have a bulldozer come in and make a giant hole and have the bodies next to the hole and just push them in, cover with dirt. Apparently, they're not going to do that with these bodies. They're going to put them in plastic. Now, when I first saw these, to me, they looked incredibly like Tupperware. Yeah, that's right. Tupperware. Storage devices. Storage devices rather than something that a mass murderer would use after decapitating or somehow killing their captives. Now, if you look at these coffins and you think about their facility in terms of keeping things maybe fresh, maybe protecting them from the elements, and you also think about the guillotines, if you wanted to use the body later or have it available later, a good way to execute somebody would be with a guillotine. Now, a guillotine, unlike a bullet, it's not going to leave lead inside the cadaver. It's not a poison, so it doesn't destroy the body in that way. Severing the head is a clean way to have a good body for preservation if you need it. It's quick and efficient. And I'm going to mention this, and we'll get into this much more later, but terror, when someone's killed in a state of terror, or an animal is killed in a state of terror, their blood is full of what is called adrenochrome. It's a substance that, if drank, is extremely addictive. It's extremely stimulating, and it's needed for satanic ritual ceremonies and other uses. And I'll get into that later. Before we go any further, as I was looking into this subject, as I was looking into guillotines, beheading, and all those things, I ran into this short discussion analyzing the cover of the most recent Economist magazine. This is analysis by BP Earthwatch. Since we're on the subject of dead and dying and body parts and adrenochrome, I think this is a pretty relevant thing to listen to. This is BP Earthwatch.
Guys, last month on January the 20th, if you notice a timestamp in the bottom left, I did this video. It's called Massive Immigrant Organ Harvest, Merkel's True Plan, Part 1. At that point, we started watching the events in Oregon, and I haven't updated it, but something came out in the European headlines yesterday that topped this off, and I want to go back. I know when many of you saw this, you said, well, BP is finally going off the deep end, but what caught my attention about the man in the UFO with the organs and a jar of brains on the front of his UFO there was, I had done a series a few years ago about the Dulce underground bases. If you have not seen that series, it's probably at the bottom of the main page. And Hillary Clinton standing right beside her ties into it on the U.S. side of this. It's very deeply involved worldwide. What are the implications? Now, this is Hillary and the head of Planned Parenthood. They won their case. They're going to get all the money to continue to slaughter millions of babies. What are they doing with the organs? Why is the man with the briefcase in the UFO right here? Why are there a jar of brains on the front, human brains, by the way, and on the back of the UFO? Is that because it's going to be used for food? There's also chopsticks there. Now, why do I know that's a jar of human brains? Remember in the video on the 20th, inside this magazine, they had an article on organ harvesting. Not just human brains, but all the organs. Just like Planned Parenthood and just like in Europe. And my point of the video on the 20th is, why is Angela letting so many migrants in when it's causing complete chaos and destroying the country there? The crime rates are sky high. It's costing them billions of dollars to do this. What is the deal? And in a high-def picture of the man inside that UFO, he is shouting at her like it's time to pay up the debt. Kind of like the Crossroads movie. Remember that, when the devil come to collect the debt? And guys, it goes so deep, back into the Dulce area, back into Roswell, back into the time that Eisenhower and Truman signed deals on the Air Force Base with a craft that landed there. And as far as protecting the people, allowing certain things to go on by the people in the UFOs, and allowing certain technology as far as nuclear bombs and nuclear fusion to be handed down as swap out. But now it appears that the deal is being called. Time to lay the cards on the table. Guys, this is important. Now, the reason I know that the front jar is brains, because in the same magazine there's an article about organ harvesting and what a profit has become, and there's something deeper and darker behind this. And I said at that time, why was Angela Merkel allowing up to 1 million people to migrate? Now they're talking about more, and immigrants to come into that nation and spread through Europe. They're having riots. They're having huge crime waves. They're having to shut down large sections of cities as no-go zones for police. But in this article, they talk about different things on the cover. But this one, they're talking about brains, intestines, kidneys, livers, lips. It's called human organ harvesting. And that's what is on the front of that UFO. Now, a lot of people blew that off because we were covering a lot of things when I did that video. I didn't follow it up. We were watching the situation in Oregon and a couple other things. But look, this is what is on the front of that flying saucer. Again, same magazine. Now, coming out in the headlines in Europe, and I'll link to it, missing migrant children may have had their organs harvested. And this is coming from a leading German Muslim. This is not from an immigrant. They're just like in the United States. You've got Muslims that are professionals or politicians or they're professors or whatever. You have established people there also, and they're complaining that over 5,000 migrant children are presumed missing in the country since the start of the migrant crisis last year. Guys, I talked about this and I brought it up. Now the headlines are coming out there. It says we must assume that many of these children and young people have fallen into criminal circles, that they are forced into prostitution, or they're getting their organs are getting removed. He said in a statement at a press conference where he was joined by German federal government advisor John Wilhelm Rohrig, who raises awareness of child sexual abuse. There's something behind this, guys, and it's called the NIH Neurobiobank, and it's not an obsolete group. This is the U.S. government. A couple of other foundations in it, but it's a U.S. government-run deal. And their big deal is they bring together multiple stakeholders to facilitate research advanced through the collection and distribution of human post-mortem brain tissue. This stakeholder group includes brain and tissue repositories, researchers, program staff. Notice at the bottom it says to facilitate the distribution of high quality, well-characterized human post-mortem brain tissue for the research community. Guys, do you really think they need hundreds of thousands of fetal brains from babies? Do you really think that's what they're doing? Where are the missing kids going? Over 1 million kids a year now are disappearing on the planet. But it says this group was established in 2013. And it's not just about brain tissue. Listen, it says there it's a national resource for investigators utilizing human post-mortem brain tissue and related biospecimens for their research to understand conditions of their nervous system. That's bull. This is very evil and it's very dark. Why were they dealing with the UFO, with organs and food? You tell me. It's the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institute of Health, the USA.gov. That's who the Neurobiobank is, and each nation has this. Now, what just happened in Texas? You think that Hillary and that bunch is not evil? In a politically motivated grand jury hearing on Monday, the evidence of illegal practices of dismembering unborn children was ignored while the investigative journalist who revealed the abortion atrocities was indicted for exercising his First Amendment rights. People who report the crime should not be indicted due to the political ties of the prosecutors. And that's what happened. They could not stop this baby harvesting. And why would Merkel do this? She's not stupid. They didn't say evil. Senior members of Merkel's governing Grand Coalition have demanded steep rises in their departmental budgets in order to house, employ, and integrate migrants coming into Europe. Why? Again, they're going to rake the taxpayer as from a crisis they created. But what are they going to do with these people? There's a crime explosion. Again, it doesn't make sense. Remember New Year's Eve, all the sexual complaints and harassment? Well, they just had the carnival there. They said they had it under control now. But it says despite a heavy police presence, the Cologne Carnival saw more assaults, 66. Now think about this. NATO is moving a naval group into the Aegean without delay for migrant missions. And who's in charge? NATO. They're following the request of Germany, Greece, and Turkey. All right, guys, right now they can report people missing once they get on land. If they disappear at sea, which many have, or if they're collected at sea, we'll never know the true numbers. But there's some of the facts here. 39,000 people in France go missing or never seen again. Germany, 50,000. Brazil, 40,000. Australia, 30,000. England, 88 every day, 2,000 in the United States every day, 800,000 in the United States every year. Millions of people go missing the world over every year, and the vast majority are never seen or heard of from or found again. Guys, if you don't think UFOs exist, you're wrong. The reason I say that is because I have seen them. And many of you have heard me talk about this before. And it was so ironic the way that went down, because I had said on YouTube that I was going to Dulce. I was doing a series about the Dulce underground bases. I wanted to go over there and check it out. But we stopped in Phoenix. 16 UFOs buzzed us 100 feet off the ground. They were the large, orange, bright colored orbs, probably 100, 150 feet wide, and they weren't distant stars in the sky. They buzzed right over us, and they were swimming in and out of each other's flight pattern like a flock of birds, very fast. They were reported all over Phoenix that night. An hour later, they had changed direction and were moving north over Denver. I have seen them with my own eyes, stood there, counted them. Thousands of people also saw that. I've done videos about it, so I know they exist. I know something is there that's different. Someone replied when I reported that video in 2013 that it goes along with the Hopi legend called the Flying Shields. Now, these images aren't the clearest in the world, but they were much closer than this. I had just arrived. I was just outside of Phoenix in the Estrella Mountain Range, very across the Gila River. When this happened, they were coming out of Phoenix and headed over the mountains south into Mexico. Again, an hour later, moving north in Denver. The same count I counted, 16, was the count that came out of Colorado. So these things exist. Something else is there, and there's some very dark things going on between people like Merkel and Hillary Clinton. Can you imagine if she became president of the United States? What a horror and a nightmare it would become here. Think about this, guys. It's a heads up. Be safe.
All right, when I heard that little piece from BP Earthwatch, it kind of expands the topic. What's happening with people? You know, when you think about 100,000 people dying, it's a statistic. But when each individual dies, it's a whole different matter. And what they've done to us so far, and they're continuing to do it, is to put us in a state of dehumanization so that we can think about body parts as being something we can buy and sell. Thinking of death differently. You know, there are people in our society where we have to put them to death. There's just way too many people on the earth. This is a process of dehumanization. Dehumanization has to happen while they're doing genocide or while they're doing eugenics on us. You have to start thinking of human bodies as being products, and human beings as being just another species in this infinite universe all over. There's a person named D.C. McAllister, and he has an interesting quote I can read here. The road to atrocity is paved with dehumanization. It's necessary. It's a normal part of genocide, and it's exploited and propagated by propaganda, by the use of seemingly harmless terms like products of conception. That's the thing they're using to dehumanize unborn children. They're just products of conception, and we can chop them up and do whatever we want to with them. Dehumanization is the key. It's really what they need to do. Now, we know that all oligarchs, because they're satanic and based in Satan worship, are eugenicists. Remember, we went through this before. The 4 tenets of Satanism are worship of the ego, 5 sense reality, everything's happening now, so preserve your reality, preserve whatever the ego does. 2, moral relativity. Just to save the ego, it's very important that whatever we do, and we can justify it based on some morality. There's no black and white. There's no good and bad. There's just whatever we need to please the ego. The third tenet of Satanism is social Darwinism. Now, if you're starting to awaken, you realize that regular Darwinism is kind of nonsense. Now, but they need regular Darwinism to base social Darwinism on. Now, social Darwinism deals with, it's the survival of the fittest. Now it's the supremacy of the fittest. And in their case, the supremacy of the most ruthless. So that's the first three tenets. The fourth tenet, since it's the survival of the most ruthless, they can decide who lives and dies. And that's what they do in eugenics and genocide. That's why it's very important that they dehumanize us. They do it through transhumanism. Human beings aren't perfect. They can be modified. They can be enhanced. They should be enhanced because, they have negative emotions. They can't run as fast as a car. And these other things that they feel are problems with the human species. And they use it to dehumanize. And dehumanization is important because they have plans for our bodies that are very difficult to look into. By the way, have you ever heard of Democide? These are acts of murder committed by governments. All governments turn into oligarchies, and all our oligarchs are eugenicists. So it would make sense that Democide is some indication of how successfully our governments are eliminating the population. You know, more people die of Democide, killed by the governments, than they do in wars. Here's an article on Democide.
This is an article entitled Democide, Mass Murder and the New World Order, written by Paul Adams, posted on the Activist Post. Joseph Stalin said, "A single death is a tragedy. 1,000,000 deaths is a statistic." And from Zbigniew Brzezinski, "In earlier times, it was easier to control 1,000,000 people than physically to kill 1,000,000 people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1,000,000 people than to control 1,000,000 people." Many people believe that governments are too bureaucratic, incompetent, and lazy to accomplish anything substantial. However, history has demonstrated that powerful elites have used governments to do one thing extremely efficiently: democide. According to Professor R.J. Rummel of the University of Hawaii, democide is the murder of any person or people by a government, including genocide, politicide, and mass murder. Democide does not include soldiers killed in a battle. During the 20th century alone, Rummel calculates that government power was used to murder approximately 262 million people. In the Soviet Union, approximately 61,911,000 people, 54,769,000 of them citizens, were murdered by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union from 1917 to 1987. Adams in this article also talks about genocide in China, in Nazi Germany, Vietnam and Southeast Asia, Cambodia, and Iraq. Moving along further down in the article where it talks about the soft kill democide of the United States. And by the way, we will leave a link to this article in the show notes so you can read the entire article yourself. United States soft kill democide. In their quest for death and depopulation, the globalists are currently conducting soft kill democide. Obama's top science advisor, John P. Holdren, co-authored Ecoscience, in which he advocated the formation of a planetary regime that would use a global police force to enforce totalitarian measures of population control, including forced abortions, mass sterilization programs conducted via the food and water supply, as well as mandatory bodily implants that would prevent couples from having children. Maurice Hillman, one of the most prominent vaccine scientists in the history of the vaccine industry, a Merck scientist, made a recording where he openly admits the vaccines given to Americans were contaminated with leukemia and cancer viruses. Now 1 in 3 Americans will suffer and/or die from cancer. Bill Gates is also an advocate of using vaccines to reduce the population and eugenics. At a TED conference, he announced in front of a live audience, quote, "If we do a really good job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower global population by perhaps 10 or 15%, unquote. Additionally, Gates holds 500,000 shares of Monsanto, which poisons the population and environment with GMO crops. Fortunately for Gates, he has plenty of money to pay the prostitutes to propagandize him as a saint. Aluminum is used in many household products, including personal deodorant, despite the fact that it promotes cancer. Chemtrails are sprayed from planes above, poisoning the population with aluminum, strontium, and barium. There have even been reports that chemtrails contain the SV40 cancer virus. Our food has been genetically modified, packed with preservatives, and filled with toxic dyes and chemicals to the point that it is a secret soft kill weapon. Our tap water has been contaminated with toxic fluoride, an ingredient in bug poison that harms teeth, the body, and mind. All of these contaminants cause cancer, disease, or continually stress the immune system to the point that we live shorter lives. The United States Democide buildup. An abundance of evidence suggests that the globalists are planning democide for the United States. Congress and Obama passed the unconstitutional NDAA, telling Americans that they no longer have any rights and can be detained indefinitely and tortured without due process. The planned American democide appears to be modeled after General Pinochet's reign of terror, where 40,000 political prisoners were detained and thousands of others simply disappeared. Pinochet's reign of terror was made possible after he came to rule Chile through a CIA-sponsored coup. In the United States, government whistleblowers have recently stepped forward with documents proving that FEMA detention concentration camps are being activated. Additionally, a FEMA camp rendition site was discovered at Los Angeles International Airport the week after military training exercises occurred, reminiscent of Operation Urban Warrior. And so the conclusion on democide, according to this article, states, Professor Rummel has demonstrated that power kills. The greater the state power, the less the freedom of its subjects. And the greater the state power, the greater the democide. In short, the greater the freedom people have in terms of their rights and control over the state, the less killing, democide, war, revolution will occur. Rummel concludes that to stop democide, we must promote freedom.
Well, I thought that was a worthwhile article to cite, since it talks about not only the extent of democide over the 20th century, you can imagine the 21st century so far, and how it's being committed against us right now. Because, after all, we're already dehumanized. Now, how do they keep us dehumanized? How do they keep us feeling that, they can abort our children, we can be unsympathetic about people killed overseas? What about population control? We really need to eliminate population because, after all, we're destroying the planet, which is another bullshit tip. But I wrote down some reasons that I could think of, some ways that they're dehumanizing us. One of the things they do is to keep us in a 5-sense reality. In other words, there's not talk about the spiritual nature of our being, consciousness, how we're a part of consciousness. No, by the mass media and education system, we live in a physical reality. We are physical beings, and that's all we are. We experience it through these 5 senses, and anything outside of that is really unimportant because it's not going to help us make money. It's not going to help us get rich and famous. We keep us in our 5-sense reality. Also, they've kind of changed our history So that when we look back, it looks like we've evolved from much lower species. Now, there's never been any evidence of this, and it just seems like a good story to dehumanize human beings. So they keep us in this reality thinking, hey, you and me, baby, we're nothing but mammals. The third thing they do is because of the necessity of keeping in place Darwinist evolution, our geology has been modified to coincide with the evolution story. So we have no idea of the timeline of our creation or how long we've been here. If you think of consciousness, now this is going off topic a tad, but if you think of consciousness as being the ground of all being rather than atoms and molecules, you realize that human consciousness is the ground of all being, and that this whole experience started with our being conscious of it. So that this whole experience could have started when human beings started. And since we have no idea how old we are, it could have been 100 million years ago, 500 million years ago, or 6,000. Also, there's this thing called the multiverse, where we're on a spinning ball planet, which I don't believe for a minute, but we're on a spinning ball planet inside of a solar system where it's got other spinning ball planets, and all these could have life on them. And we're spinning around a sun, which is also spinning around a galactic sun. So there's a lot of solar systems. So there's solar systems, there's galaxies, and they make up universes. And then there's plenty of universes. So how more dehumanized and belittled could we be? But being almost as insignificant as a virus, which is what we refer to in the Matrix movie as a virus. So I think that's pretty dehumanizing. And then the last one I want to bring to your attention is the worship of big S science. Now, science, where little s science, where you actually do experiments and find reality and do verifiable experiments so we can really know the nature of reality. It's been replaced by big S science, science that tell you what to believe. The medical profession does this all the time. You can diagnose your own problem, but unless you're a doctor, you don't know what you're talking about. They've done the same thing with our whole reality. Our reality is what they say it is, not vice versa. So through big science, there's no God, there's no creator, there's no morality. It's just money and physical existence. So that's how they keep us in this dehumanized state. Human beings, what an incredible creation we are. And I think through many, many ancient teachings characterize us as being stewards of the planet because we're the most intelligent, we're the most aware, and we could fill that role better than any other species that we know about. So we've been dehumanized. Now, we've been dehumanized. And there's a massive effort to reduce drastically our population. Some say to 500 million. And so, it's going on all around us. And I've pulled out another interesting YouTube for us to watch now. Now, this is the preview for a movie that TMR is going to make a full-length feature. And this full-length feature is going to be called Oblivion. And it talks about massive numbers of people who are disappearing from national parks in the United States. I want you to listen to this and listen for evidence of complicity from the National Park Service. Here it is.
Well, dreams, they feel real while we're in them, right? It's only when we wake up that we realize something was actually strange.
Hey, what's up, guys? TMR. Now, I've been doing some investigations into the topic of strange deaths and missing people in our national parks again, because of course I just recently uploaded a compilation video featuring David Paulides' work. So if you missed that, link below. So I'm back on this topic again currently. If it weren't for how many deceptions we are faced with in this world on a daily basis, and so little time, it's just so difficult to keep track of it all, keep focus. But if I did have more time, I would love to have delved much deeper into this topic. So if you are still unfamiliar with this mystery or phenomenon, I do highly recommend looking into David Paulides' work, checking out his books, Missing 411, detailing and piecing together all the strange disappearances in our national parks. The thing about this subject is this information and what's happening to many people every year, going back at least 100 years, it's real and it's verifiable. We have documentation, evidence of a massive cover-up by national parks, and of course, a blackout by the mainstream media. We have clear evidence of bizarre, unexplainable patterns and anomalies taking place in so many of these disappearances and deaths in national parks. And the most tragic thing about this whole subject is it may sound tantalizing or exciting to those who are merely interested in delving into a mysterious topic, but for those that have actually had to live every day in torture and agony due to the loss of a loved one, a parent, a child, in these national parks, and they have had to deal with not having any closure whatsoever in many of these cases. Many have not only been withheld information regarding details of their lost relative, child, or family member, but have been outright lied to. This is unfathomable. And justice needs to be brought to those responsible for withholding this information. I couldn't even begin to imagine what these people go through. Imagine losing a child, in this fashion. One minute you're holding their hand, the next they vanish into oblivion. To make matters worse, strange details about your child's death is withheld from you, and you never get the truth about what really happened to your child in the wilderness. This is beyond sad and disturbing to think about. Now, a few examples of some of these bizarre anomalies and patterns that have emerged in these cases, as highlighted by David Paulides, are number one, clothes are usually found folded neatly into itself, almost as if the person literally vanished or melted into the clothes. Quite literally. Sometimes a shirt or pants are turned inside out of the body, pants tied around ankles, shoes nowhere to be found, etc. Just like the strange case of photographer Charles McCullough, whose remains were found in 1976 at Crater Lake National Park, Oregon, where it appeared as though Charles had literally melted right into his jeans while sitting on a log, which one ranger involved described it as the strangest thing he had ever seen. His pants hadn't been disturbed by animals or removed before his death. There were socks in his jeans, and there were toe bones in the socks, which these ended with a bit of broken tibia. The other huge strange element is many of the time bodies are found in areas that have previously been thoroughly searched over and over again by search and rescue operations. So someone disappears and reappears with no logical explanation as to how their body could have possibly ended up in a place previously searched. What's more, the location of the reappearance of the body most of the time is at a seemingly impossible distance from where they were last seen. This aspect is especially puzzling when this happens to toddlers or senior citizens. This element was also present in Charles McCullough's case, as his remains were found, if you can call it remains, more than 12 miles of 102 inches of fresh snowfall covering the ground throughout the park from where Charles had been taking pictures along the rim. McCullough had to have made it 12 miles in these conditions without any outdoor gear, which is unfathomable. To add more weirdness to this already ghastly scene, Charles's jeans were unbuttoned and his belt undone. No shirt or coat was ever found, and most perplexing of all, the rangers couldn't find his boots. There are many more bizarre elements to this, but these two seem to be the most prevalent in these strange disappearance cases. The other thing I find interesting about this subject is it's something you can bring up to even the most diehard skeptic imaginable, a regular Joe on the street, someone who may be absolutely hypnotized and indoctrinated by the mainstream media and pop culture, has no interest in anything conspiracy related, yet once confronted with the hard facts of these missing people and the strange facts surrounding their cases, even they cannot help but scratch their heads. That's why I also think it's great to expose this topic, because again, it makes even the most diehard skeptic and indoctrinated person think on a deeper level, entertain the possibility that there are things beyond our perception, beyond our understanding, perhaps a supernatural or spiritual element to this, etc. But even they cannot deny the severity and reality of this situation. This is something real. It's happening. People are dying in a strange way, and there's a cover-up, plain and simple.
One of the hardest things I had to live through was knowing when Jared disappeared. I was part of that circle that he could count on. And I wasn't there for him.
The fact that hundreds and hundreds of people have gone in to national parks and forests, tried to enjoy our public lands, and disappeared or were killed, it's something that the public needs to know about.
This is too much now. This is too much to be coincidence. We're talking about cold, hard evidence.
You're funny, Dad.
I know.
Jared was wearing some blue sweatpants. He had his shoes on, and he had like a beige color jacket. And what they actually said to me was, "He's okay, we just can't find him."
There was a point where he looked up at me, and I took a picture of him, and we told each other, see you in a little bit. And that was the last I saw him. I kept watching for him to arrive at Spruce Treehouse, and he never did.
Typically, people who go missing are found within hours or maybe a couple of days. As the days clicked on, the chances of finding him alive at that point were starting to slip away.
It's been 2 years since I haven't seen my dad.
We send out a rescue, but I'm really not supposed to answer any of these kind of questions, though.
Whistleblower Act protects you, right? Nope, not in this case. I used to have a lot of great faith in National Park Service. I loved those. I thought I'm a park ranger.
It's their job to protect people in national parks and forests, and you're telling me that people go in there and disappear and they don't even keep a list of it? That's a lie.
We're talking about a very large collective of stories that nobody's talking about.
He called me and said, "They're not telling you everything. One of these days I hope you find out the truth."
Just find me a bone. Just find me something for actual proof.
I think I made a mistake just by answering what I did.
That was amazing, eh? I can't wait to see the full-length movie he puts out on that subject. It should be quite dynamic. But, you start thinking about these things, it really becomes overwhelming if you're a caring, sympathetic person. One of the concepts that eugenicists and the genocidal maniac Satanists that run the planet count on is our conceptualization of the other. And in doing consciousness studies that I have over the years, I found that the smaller the conceptualization of other and the larger the conceptualization of self, the higher the ego level, the more expanded the level of consciousness becomes. In other words, here I am, and I don't care about the people in Africa because that's the other. It's not me, it's not my type of people, it's the other. I don't care about what's going on in Europe because I'm not European. That's the other. See, as your consciousness expands, the category of the other decreases. So you get more and more compassionate for more and more people until it finally covers all people and then all creatures on the planet. You see, as long as we think of those people that get lost in the parks as somebody else, or as long as we think of the people that are killed for this, that, and another reason by democide, that's the other. Nothing happened to me, nothing happened to my family. You see, it's the concept of the other. And the smaller the concept of the other, the higher level consciousness we think through. In other words, the more impressive is our ability to conceptualize solutions. Remember when Einstein said that answers to today's problems cannot be discovered thinking through the same consciousness level as created them? Well, that's what this is all about. It's about expanding your consciousness, taking everybody so that there's no others. But see, with the concept of others, the eugenicists really have a leg up, because, you know, it's the Southerners that are causing the problems. Black lives matter. White lives don't matter. You see it's a divide and conquer. They divide us, label the other, and then they can destroy whoever they want to, and we won't say a thing. An extreme example of that is happening in China with an organization called the Falun Gong. Now, the Falun Gong is simply a set of spiritual beliefs put together to form an approach to life, an approach to health. Let's learn a little bit about Falun Gong and what's happening to Falun Gong in China.
Falun Dafa, also known as Falun Gong, was introduced to the general public in 1992. The practice quickly grew in popularity as more and more people came to benefit from it. A government survey estimated up to 100 million people practicing in China alone. They were from all walks of life, even high-ranking Communist Party officials. By 1998, Falun Dafa had gained widespread respect in Chinese society. Then, on July 20th, 1999, fearing that Falun Dafa's widespread popularity was overshadowing his own legacy, China's then President Jiang Zemin ordered the traditional Chinese practice eradicated. According to a Washington Post article, quote, Communist Party sources said that the Standing Committee of the Politburo did not unanimously endorse the crackdown, and that President Jiang Zemin alone decided that Falun Gong must be eliminated. Jiang unleashed the full force of the police, the army, and the secret police to arbitrarily detain, arrest, and beat practitioners. Some practitioners were sentenced to prison for as long as 18 years, even though they had committed no crime. In order to justify the persecution to the general public, a systematic nationwide media campaign was organized by the government to demonize Falun Dafa, calling its practitioners crazy. They then said that they were trying to help practitioners by brainwashing them. International media were barred from filming and broadcasting stories about the persecution.
2 days before, I had been filming on Tiananmen Square and got caught, managed to hide the tape in my underwear as usual, and was threatened by the police to be kicked out of the country if I did any more Falun Gong.
The crackdown targeted women, children, and the elderly, along with everybody else. However, the persecution did not work. It failed to stop people practicing, so the persecution was intensified.
Young or old, male or female, adult or child, the Chinese authorities show no respect, no regard for human life, no mercy, and no remorse.
Zhong Haiyuan, a teacher at the Zhengfengshan Primary School in Ganzhou City, was being detained because she supported so-called counter-revolutionist Li Julian. During the detention, she refused to admit any guilt. Moreover, she wrote on the prison wall, "Down with Hua Guofeng," the then Chinese Communist Party leader. As a result, Zhong Haiyuan was also classed as counter-revolutionary and sentenced to death. On April 30th, 1978, she was tied up, paraded on the street, and then taken to the execution site to be executed. The soldiers who carried out the execution deliberately fired the bullet at the right side of her back instead of the left side where the heart lies, so that she would not die instantly. Waiting medical personnel rushed forward and brought her into a covered military vehicle. On the surgery table temporarily set up for the purpose, they quickly took her kidneys while she was still alive. One of the kidneys was soon transplanted into the body of a senior official's son in Nanchang No. 92 Field Hospital. Over 30 years have passed since then. With the reform and open-door policy, China's economy has grown rapidly. At the same time, induced by huge profits, the number of organ transplants has also increased astonishingly. Especially since 1999, there has been an explosive increase in the number of organ transplants in China. According to official figures, the annual number of organ transplants reached nearly 20,000 in 2006, ranking it number 2 in the world. Moreover, people who could receive organ transplants have expanded from the privileged senior officials of the Chinese Communist regime to rich people who could afford the high price. Before 2007, as long as one could afford a few 100,000 Chinese yuan, many large hospitals in China could offer the shortest waiting time for organs. In the 6 or 7 years since year 2000, the waiting time publicly declared by some hospitals was 1 to 4 weeks, or even several days. Many large hospitals carried out multiple transplant surgery at the same time, day and night without stop. Behind these astonishing figures hides a serious question. In China, where are these massive number of human organs coming from? In the 21st century today, does the tragedy suffered by Zhong Haiyuan, whose organs were harvested while alive, still go on? The United States is the largest organ transplant nation in the world. It has a well-established national database of organ donors and recipients. It also has a highly effective shared network for nationwide organ transplants. About 80 million people voluntarily agree to donate their organs after their death. At the same time, the number of organ donations from relatives is also very large. Even with a system like this, the average waiting time for organ transplants in the U.S. is still quite long. The heart, about 8 months. The liver, 26 months. And the kidney, 37 months. Why is this? Because the organs used for transplants must be from healthy people. Moreover, the organ's ischemia time during the transplant must be very short. The kidney requires less than 12 to 24 hours. The liver is 12 hours, while the heart is 4 to 6 hours. Therefore, unless they are donated from living relatives, the organs used for transplant can only be from healthy voluntary donors who have just died. Not only that, patients can only accept organs matching their blood types and tissue types. Take kidney transplantation as an example. According to National Kidney Foundation of the United States, the chance of getting a perfect match kidney from a non-relative donor is only 6.5%. Obviously, the probability of getting a suitable healthy organ is quite small. In China, due to cultural reasons as well as a lack of related legal safeguards, the number of voluntary organ donors is pitifully small. Up to September 2007, China had only 61 organ donors in total from brain death. Organ donation from relatives only accounts for 1.1% of total organ transplants there. Although legal and legitimate organ sources are very rare, large hospitals in China never seem to worry about sources of organs. The Oriental Organ Transplant Center used to claim on its website the average waiting time for a suitable liver is 2 weeks. On the application form for an organ transplant at the Organ Transplant Department of Shanghai Changjung Hospital of the 2nd Military Medical University, it once clearly wrote, the average waiting time for a liver transplant is 1 week among all patients. Established in 2003 and closed in September 2007, The China International Transplantation Network Assistance Center was an organ agency for foreigners. It was situated at the Organ Transplant Research Center of the first affiliated hospital of China Medical University in Shenyang, Liaoning Province. Through this agency, as for the kidney transplantation, it may take 1 week to find a suitable donor, the maximum time being 1 month. It further goes on to say, if the doctor discovers that there is something wrong with the donor's organ, the patient will have the option to be offered another organ donor and have the operation again in 1 week. China's Sanlian Life Weekly reported on April 7, 2006, about 98% of organ sources in our country are controlled by authorities other than the Ministry of Health. What are those authorities other than the Ministry of Health? The article did not specify. Before its closure, the Chinese International Transplantation Network Assistance Center disclosed even more astonishing information. The website's question and answer section contained the following set of questions and answers. Question: even if the organ transplant operation is successful, is the survival time after the surgery only 2 or 3 years? Answer: indeed, we often hear this kind of query, but this refers to the kidney transplant cases in Japan where organs were taken from brain-death corpses. In China, kidneys are taken from live bodies. This is completely different from what Japanese hospitals do. Question: is it possible to be infected with other diseases such as HIV or hepatitis after the kidney transplantation? Answer: it is not necessary to worry about that. The biggest problem with a kidney transplantation is the tissue match. Before the living kidney transplantation, we will examine the donor's renal function and leukocyte in order to assure the safety of the kidney. So it is more safe and reliable here than in other countries, where the organ is not from a living donor. The question-answer section disclosed a clear and explicit message. The organs are not from corpses or brain death victims. Instead, they are from living people. In fact, the China International Transplantation Network Assistance Center is not the only living organ provider in China. Here is a phone conversation between an investigator posing as a patient's relative and a doctor in the First People's Hospital of Shanghai Jiao Tong University.
你好，你是肝移植中心，它的号码是多少？转接中，请稍后。喂，你好。喂，你好。我现在有一个表妹啊，丙型肝炎18年了，是慢性活动性，
丙型肝炎。
但是现在
我跟你讲，你这个肝移植是可以的。
那我就问啊，要等多久？
工体有天天有
现在
我们今天就来做。
不是，你现在又不是说是有新鲜的，有活的人的，你这个
都是活的。
啊？
都是活的。
The precondition to ensure the supply of such large number of human organs for such short waiting times is the existence of a large organ bank of live donors. Furthermore, this group of people must be under strict control so that their physical conditions could be examined any time. Whenever a transplant patient arrived, a matching donor would be found from the bank. His or her organs would be taken out for the transplantation in order to ensure the organ's freshness and vitality. So what kind of people form this live organ bank? The international community commonly believe the allegation that the Chinese communist regime takes organs from the executed prisoners for transplants. However, this single source of organ supply cannot account for the explosive increase in the number of organ transplants in China during the past decade. Although the exact number of the executed prisoners in China is a so-called state secret, the state-run China News proclaimed in its report on September 6, 2007. For more than a decade, the people's courts have been very careful with and taken strict control in giving out death penalties. The number of executions have been decreasing steadily. Meanwhile, according to reports by official Chinese media, the total number of organ transplants in China during the 6 years after 2000 was more than 3 times that of the 6 years prior to 2000. If those 98% of organs for transplants in China that came from non-medical system were all from the executed prisoners, how could one explain the sharp increase of organ transplants in the past decade, while the death penalties had been decreasing steadily? Was it due to the improvement in transplant technology? Let's take a look at the kidney transplant. In 1998, the number of kidney transplants in China was 3,596. In 2004, it exceeded 10,000, 3 times that of '98. Between '98 and 2004, there had not been much improvement in kidney transplant technology. Obviously, technology improvement is not the reason behind the explosive increase in kidney transplants. Moreover, death penalties need to go through certain legal procedures, such as court hearings and appeals. Prisoners could not just be sentenced to death and their organs taken when transplant patients came. Then, what group of people could be subjected to organ harvesting and their lives taken so conveniently and speedily? Other than the prisoners on death row, who were these large group of people that were forced to live between life and death? For decades, the Chinese Communist regime have consistently denied allegations from the international community that it harvests organs from the executed prisoners. However, in 2005, at a World Health Organization conference in Manila, China's Deputy Health Minister Huang Jiafu publicly admitted for the first time that the majority of China's transplant organs were from the executed prisoners. But on April 10, 2004, Mao Chuinan, the spokesperson for the Ministry of Health, again denied harvesting organs from the executed prisoners when answering questions from reporters. In November 2006, at a meeting in Guangzhou, Huang Jiafu acknowledged again that over 90% of transplant organs in China came from the executed prisoners. Subsequently, on January 11, 2007, Mao Chuinan changed his tune in his interview with the BBC and also claimed that most of China's transplant organs were from executed prisoners. Apparently, on the issue of whether to publicly admit the organ source being from the executed prisoners, there were initially different views inside the Chinese Communist regime. Then what had forced the regime to conform to a single view and publicly admit a scandal it had been denying for decades? Was it because of the awakening of their conscience, or was it being used to cover an even larger crime? On December 22, 2000, the overseas Falun Gong Minghui website suddenly published a piece of news from China, alleging some evil police are plotting with greedy doctors to sell organs of Falun Gong practitioners. It is learned that just one clinic in the city of Shijiazhuang alone has been given 6 organs. Without disclosing further details and because the brutality in the information was beyond belief, this news didn't get much attention at the time. 5 years later, on March 8, 2006, an anonymous former Chinese media reporter in Japan told the U.S. Epoch Times that there existed a special place in Sujiatun district in Shenyang, Liaoning province, where large numbers of Falun Gong practitioners was secretly detained. These practitioners would eventually be killed and their organs taken for transplants.
您估计大概有多少法轮功学员被关押在里面？
我不能很确切的说这么一个数字，因为经常性有变动，但是在当时吧，所得到的数据呢，应该是有6000人，但是什么时候？当时是在2年前左右吧。
也就是2004年。
左右的那个时间里面。
他们是在里面，可能是在被强迫转化、被打、被关押，在生命垂危的时候，然后器官被取出来、被移植、被卖，是可以这么理解吗？
对，我认为是这个情况，但是，他们一定是在一种什么样的一种情况下，是被迫的，就是说，或者说是在毫无知觉的情况下，上了手术台，取出了他们的脏器，我认为是这种情况。
这些人还有出来的可能性吗？
我只能在心里祈祷着他们能够出来，他们能平安地回到他们家人的身边。
9 days later, a former employee of Liaoning Provincial Thrombosis Treatment Medical Center at Sujiatun disclosed more details about this secret detention center to the Epoch Times. She said that this secret detention center was actually situated inside the hospital where she worked. The exact address is 49 Shusong Road, Sujiatun District, Shenyang. In this hospital, shocking atrocities of large-scale organ harvesting from living Falun Gong practitioners, such as kidney, liver, and cornea took place. Her ex-husband took part in cornea removals from live Falun Gong practitioners.
我的前夫曾经参与过摘除法轮功学员器官的手术，他是一名脑外科医生。参与摘除法轮功学员眼角膜手术，包括部分在法轮功学员活体上摘除眼角膜。我的家人告诉我说，他说你不知道我有多么痛苦，因为这些法轮功学员是活的。若从死人身体上摘除器官，这还好说，可这些人都真的还是活的。这些事情都是秘密进行的。我们医院参与的医生很多是从其他医院调过来的实习医生。这些人的器官被摘除以后，有的人就直接被丢进焚尸炉中火化，没有留下任何痕迹。
After the second Sujatun witness came forward, another 10 days passed amid shock, anxiety, and speculations. Surprisingly, the Chinese Communist regime, that is usually very sensitive to the international media, kept quiet for 3 weeks on such sensational accusations. On March 28th, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Qin Gang denied the Sujatun incident at a regular press conference, calling the accusation deliberate fabrication and wicked slander. Qin also invited foreign media to visit Sujatun and conduct their own investigations. Perhaps as a response to the Foreign Ministry statement, 2 days later, a man who identified himself as a veteran military doctor in the Shenyang military region wrote to the Epoch Times to confirm the existence of the Sujatun concentration camp. He further alleged that Sujatun was just one of several dozen such concentration camps across China. A month later, this veteran military doctor wrote to the Epoch Times again, disclosing more detailed information on organ harvesting of living Falun Gong practitioners. He said during the detention, real names were used for Falun Gong practitioners and other detainees. But when it came to organ transplant, fake names were used. In other words, false identities were created. And the information about these fake people was quite complete. Moreover, these people would have signed voluntary organ donation forms. Of course, the signature was faked as well. I had encountered over 60,000 of these documents with falsified signatures. All of them said that the individual voluntarily agreed to donate some kind of organs for transplant and was willing to undertake all the consequences. There were even signed forms expressing their willingness to donate their hearts for transplants. Many signatures were the handwriting from the same person. The time limit for keeping these documents was 18 months. Then they must be destroyed. This veteran military doctor continued. Many people concentrated their attention on the official organ transplant figures. In reality, the number of organ transplants carried out underground was many times more than the official figures. The organ transplants are managed by the military, so attentions must be concentrated on many military facilities. Those are the true concentration camps.
I know that was really sobering, but I think we need to watch stuff to make sure it's not happening. And that's what happens when you can allow government or somebody to dehumanize part of the population. And you can say here in the West, well, you know, that could never happen. Well, I'll tell you 2 reasons why it could happen and it is happening. First of all, remember in the beginning, they said that the first thing that the Chinese government did was to dehumanize Falun Gong by calling the Falun Gong practitioners crazy. Well, you know, they've got this term called denier. And when you become a denier, you're labeled as crazy by the mainstream people. There's 9/11 deniers. There's Holocaust deniers. Boy, those guys are really crazy. There's climate change deniers. They're endangering the lives of all of us. And then there's the global earth deniers. They're the craziest of all. So you can see how your beliefs can make you crazy to the mainstream. So that's one reason that could happen here. Another reason is that we always say, well, you know, they'd never harvest organs from a live donor here. Oh, yeah?
Reading from an article entitled Save the Brain Dead Victims on lifeissues.net. Origin of the brain death theory. Brain death did not originate or develop by way of application of the scientific method. A heart transplant took place in South Africa in 1967. 3 days later after the transplant, a beating heart was cut out of a newborn baby in Brooklyn, New York. There were 150 hearts transplanted between 1967 and 1968. It was a desire to make heart transplantation morally acceptable and legal that led to the invention of the ad hoc committee of the Harvard Medical School to examine the definition of brain death. The primary purpose of the Harvard Committee was not to determine if irreversible coma was an appropriate criterion for death, but to see to it that it was established as a new criterion for death. The purpose was to make it medically and legally acceptable to get beating hearts for transplantation. The committee report, entitled A Definition of Irreversible Coma, was published in 1968 in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Missing from the Harvard Committee's report were the most basic scientific studies, patient data, and references, as well as the numerous objections from honest, conscientious physicians who participated in the committee and strongly objected to the definition of brain death as true death. In other words, there was a serious lack of scientific method in the origination and later development of the brain-related criteria. The translation of comatose into dead was first accomplished with the publication of the Harvard criteria. The change in definitions was based on a lie. It is important to keep in mind that only someone alive can be in a coma, even when the condition is said to be irreversible. Neither the term coma nor the phrase comatose state can be applied to someone who is actually dead. Vital organ excision for transplantation. Excision of the heart or liver from a living human being causes death. Therefore, it is immoral to remove an unpaired vital organ before death. Moreover, it is not possible to successfully transplant an unpaired vital organ after death. To satisfy a desire for transplantable organs, an ingenious method was devised to get around these realities. Some living but comatose patients were simply determined to be brain dead. Ethically, may one excise a beating heart from a person who has vital signs, someone who is warm, has normal blood pressure and circulation, and has many other intact, functioning organs and systems, maintaining the unity of the organism as a whole? At the very least, if there is doubt that death has occurred, may one excise a vital organ? The answer to both questions is no. Yet, in using brain-related criteria for death, every heart transplant surgeon removes a beating heart or stops the beating heart just before lifting it out of the donor's chest. Such organ excision has become commonplace. The reason behind why fewer and fewer persons question the morality of such action is the powerful lobbying and deceitful marketing techniques being used to encourage donation of human organs. This has turned it into a billion-dollar industry. Shockingly, most physicians are unfamiliar with the brutality of this medical practice. They assumed that what seems questionable must be all right if the experts are doing it, instead of remembering that what is wrong is always wrong, even if the experts are doing it. Few physicians have been able to get their voices heard in medical publications. The main ones are controlled by those who have been supporting abortions for years, and brain death as true death.
Interesting, eh? Well, now you know the origin of the brain dead thing. It wasn't based on any science at all. It was totally based on economic need. Now, we could go into the aborted fetuses and the sale of the partial, and the sale of the organs and the whole bodies, and we will touch on that a little bit later. But I'm going to try to keep this video as short as possible And also, I think I have a very sophisticated audience that knows all about and have heard the Planned Parenthood videos enough. So let's stick with adults. And I'm going to read from an article that I just recently found called Living Cadavers, How the Poor Are Tricked into Selling Their Organs. Over the course of 15 months, anthropologist Monir Moniruzzaman infiltrated and tracked the illegal organ trafficking network in Bangladesh. And here you can see a couple of people who were donors. After being coerced into surgery, organ donors are left with a 20-inch long scar around their torsos. According to Moniruzzaman, if the organ recipients paid an extra $200, the operation could have been performed laparoscopically with a minimal scarring. Well, I think they're getting about 1,000, maybe 1,500 for these organs. Let's see. In America, if you need an organ transplant, you wait. You wait patiently, with a grim clock ticking away for some generous stranger who died and happened to mark organ donor on his driver's license. The other option is asking a family member or a friend to donate a piece of their being, knowingly taking on medical risks, but with full and honest cooperation. But what if you could forego all of that? What if you could buy an organ? It may sound reasonable, paying for an organ from someone who could use the money more than an intact anatomy. But the real picture is grim. In a research paper published last week in the Medical Anthropology Quarterly, Michigan State anthropologist Monir Moniruzzaman recounts the nearly 15 months he spent doing fieldwork in Bangladesh, where he infiltrated the illegal organ trafficking network. What he saw there he describes as nothing short of exploitation. He says, quote, "The service of transplantation fills the needs of fewer than 1% of the population, the wealthy minority." Moniruzzaman writes in his paper, quote, "While the majority of Bangladeshis die in silence, knowing they could have saved their lives through this modern technology." As of 2007, the World Health Organization estimated that there are about a dozen countries involved in organ trafficking networks, and they should know. For obvious reasons, hard data on the trade is difficult to come by and often takes investigative fieldwork like Moniruzzaman's to cover how organs move through the underground market. In a 2008 paper in the American Journal of Transplantation, estimated that organ trafficking accounts for roughly 5 to 10% of all the kidney transplants performed in the world. And even in America, organ trade is not unheard of. In October, a Brooklyn man admitted to brokering kidney sales between Israeli donors and New Jersey recipients. He reportedly earned $410,000 from the transactions. It goes on to tell how he interviewed people, and he's a native of Bangladesh. To entrap potential sellers, organ brokers tell them that they have two kidneys, but one of them is sleeping in the body. During the operation, doctors awaken this dormant kidney and take the old one out for donation. In this view, the second kidney is just baggage, a cash reserve buried in the lower back. Furthermore, sellers are told that their second kidney is of no use to them if their first one fails, which quiets thoughts of, quote, "What if I need that second kidney in the future?" End quote. They're also told the surgery is 100% safe. Quote, "It's the same story sellers told me again and again," Moniruzzaman says. "I couldn't believe how much of a dirty trick can be." So here he goes on to say that they're paying the seller around $1,150. And I've heard, I don't think it was in this article, but in another article, where they make $150,000 per organ. Maybe not kidneys, but on some organs. So, it says here, the circumcision was done crudely and only with local anesthesia. Quote, "When I was coming back home, the anesthesia stopped working," he told the anthropologist. And I felt like it was a nightmare. Oh, jeez. So can you imagine how this is happening? And you know that human trafficking is incredibly prolific throughout the world.
His victims called him uncle. Osweya Osalasi trafficked Nigerian girls into and out of the UK. They were promised a better life, but in reality they were part of a modern-day slave trade. Today at Canterbury Crown Court, Osalasi was found guilty of raping one girl, sexually abusing another, and attempting to send all three to Europe to be sold for sex.
Osalasi is an evil, predatory paedophile who has profited from the misery of others for a long period of time.
He targeted the poorest and most vulnerable in Nigeria. His victims were orphans with little education. One, a 16-year-old, lived under a bridge in Lagos. Another, at 14, was sold by her husband to Osalasi. The third victim was 17.
They were the perfect sort of people for traffickers to target because they've lost their self-esteem. They have no strong family ties, nobody to support them. They are in fear of the authorities. They don't really understand how to interact, and they've been sort of placed into a victim mindset already. So they're ideal for the manipulation of traffickers.
Using fake passports and visas, he brought two of the girls into the UK in the spring of last year. He then took them to his home here in Gravesend. Locals say he kept himself to himself. He worked at a recycling plant in Swanscombe, all the while earning thousands of euros from his trafficking business. On two of his victims he practiced juju, a West African belief. One of the rituals was carried out in the UK, the other in Nigeria. It was for them a kind of spell, ensuring their cooperation. He collected some of their head hair and cut their pubic hair. One was told to bathe in a red blood-like liquid. He took the 14-year-old's underwear, and on both he collected a vial of their blood.
The fear, the terror sometimes that they display when talking about what happened to them, because they've been told that if they do this, that death and disaster will pursue them wherever they are. And one of the objects of these rituals is to instill terror into the young women.
And Osalasi did that.
And Osalasi did that.
It was here at Stansted Airport, as they were being trafficked out of the country, that the girls were picked up by border staff. They were travelling on fraudulent passports on their way to mainland Europe. It's likely they were being sold for sexual exploitation. Police believe the three girls were not his only victims. Examining Osalasi's flight bookings and credit card payments, it's thought he was part of a Europe-wide trafficking network, with flights out to Alicante in Spain, Milan, Bergamo, Malpensa and Verona in Italy, Wies in Germany, Gothenburg in Sweden and Limoges in France. He may have trafficked 25 other people. He'll now be sentenced on Monday morning. Fiona Irving, BBC South East Today, Canterbury Crown Court.
Well, that's a little video on sex trafficking, human trafficking. And human trafficking is done for sex slavery, and it's also done for body parts, and it's also done for whole bodies for other reasons, as we'll talk about in a minute. Here's a problem with that video. Number one, it makes it look like it's a black problem, that this is done by black people out of Africa, and that is not true. We've learned from the Hampstead cover-up and the investigations done by Abraham and Ella that their babies come from all over the place, even the United States. San Francisco was one of the locations mentioned where babies are taken sometimes from their mother, sometimes they're paid for. Okay, and they're trafficked into the UK, into the United States, wherever they need sex slaves, MK Ultra slaves, body parts, or babies for satanic ritual sacrifice, which is very, very common. But I don't want you to think that this is something that's done by black people to black people in Africa. This is something that's worldwide. It's done in every country. Satanic ritual abuse is done all over the world. Organ transplants are done all over the world. And sex slaves are employed all over the world. It's really a big problem. Actually, I saw a video today by, actually it was by George Soros. It was actually by his organization called Open Society. But that's George Soros. George Soros funded. And George Soros, in this video, is urging a realistic look at the drug trade. In other words, we've been fighting this war on drug since the 70s. I mean, that's a long time, and it's never eliminated or even cut back on drugs, because drugs are brought in by the government. The government funds their black ops operations on the drug trade. So now, why would Soros be urging a logical look that we could have taken 50, 70 years ago? I know we were thinking about, well, you know, they're lumping all the drugs together and no is the only answer. I think a more insightful approach being taken on other places in the world would be better. We knew that back then. But now Soros is coming out with this thing. What's up his sleeve? Well, here's what I think. I think that what we've done, or what we've tried to do in the West, is convert all the people that are on illegal drugs to legal drugs. We have drugs for every type of mental quirk. There's a drug for a condition of shyness. So there's medical drugs for everything. Everybody's on Prozac. Everybody's on some type of mood stabilizer. And maybe they're thinking of ratcheting down the illegal drug trade. Now, the illegal drug trade is what got them here. Started with the British East India Company and how they enslaved China to the opium. And they've been making money ever since then. You know, Prescott Bush, the grandfather of all the baby Bush and the father of George H.W. Bush, made his money through heroin trade. That's how they got so rich. That's how they got so powerful. So, but maybe now it's time to relinquish the drug trade in favor of human trafficking, because human trafficking is coming on fast. And you can see what needs they have. What are the needs for human trafficking? Well, there's body parts, there's MK Ultra slaves, there's sex slaves, you know, you name it. So I think maybe George and the boys, the big boys, the cartel, are thinking that we can maybe cut back on the drug trade. Maybe we can be a little more logical on that, because we can make even bigger money trafficking humans. See, this is what happens when you dehumanize people. Now, what are some of these used for? Well, many of them, especially the babies, are used in satanic ritual sacrifice. And it's very common, and it's all over the world. I don't know whether you've seen this testimony by Elisa and Gabriel to their experience with satanic ritual abuse and killing the babies.
We decided to stop touching each children, and stop touching each other, and stop touching ourselves. And face our urge.
What else are you going to stop doing?
And stop touching ourselves. And stop touching ourselves.
What else are you going to stop?
And stop killing babies. And stop killing babies, and we're going to face our fear and face our urge.
You're going to face your fear. Because fear is what?
Fear is the mind killer.
You're going to help us to catch. Who are you going to help us to catch?
All the people. Papa, Mr. Collins, Mr. School.
All the policemen. All the social services.
Speak up, speak up.
All the shopkeepers, all the cafes, all the pizza specials.
Who did you mention just now? Who, Caf what?
Cafes.
Who's Kafkas?
You know, the people who work at Kafkas.
What is Kafkas?
Kafkas is they're for children. They work with the social services.
And what did they do to you?
They do sex. They search each other. They touch me. They have plastic puddings. They stick it in our bottom.
Who does? Who sticks it in their bottom?
Social services. Everybody does. All of them.
Who?
Everybody.
Does your mother do it?
No.
Do I do it?
No.
Who does it then?
Papa, Mr. Collins, the school.
Parents.
My dad's fair.
Tell me some more people. Tell me some more people, please. I'm interested.
Parents, police,
What about the teachers at school? Who's the main one?
Papa, Mr. Hollins, Mrs. Forsyth.
Who's Mrs. Forsyth?
She's the head teacher of our school.
And what does she do?
And she does sex. She got a big mark with a big tattoo on her thigh.
And what happens in the church?
And we do baby sacrifice and eat the baby.
What do you mean sacrifice and eat the baby?
So we kill the baby and eat it and drink the blood from it.
Is that true, Gabriel?
Yes. And we dance with the skulls.
You what?
We dance with the skulls in the church.
What skulls?
Skulls of the baby.
Pardon?
The skulls of the baby.
You dance with the baby skulls?
Yes.
And who kills the babies?
Papa, me, and Lisa. And so...
Who kills the babies?
Papa.
And what, he gets you to help him?
Yes. So he tells us to hold the hand with a knife, and then he holds his hand on our hand, so then he cuts the baby's head off. And then he turns it upside down, and then we drain the blood.
And then what they do?
And then we cook it, and then we drink the blood, and then after we go and dance with the skulls.
Well, I know that's a shocking video. If you hadn't seen that before, actually this whole thing has been kind of a shocking video. But this part, where they're talking about killing babies, is most upsetting. Unfortunately, we have to face up to this stuff so we can stop it. We need to stop this happening, and it's happening all over. One thing I'm going to tell you, this is a trigger warning, is that they just don't take a sleeping baby and cut its head off. They want that baby to be filled with adrenochrome, so they make it terrified. You can use your imagination on that one. This is something that's happening all over the world. It's happening in the United States. It's happening in Australia. People are coming forward right and left that have been involved with this. Of course, the babies that were killed aren't. If you look at Jay Parker, who was raised in a satanic family, he says there's 3.5 million satanic practitioners in the world. Now, they all might not sacrifice babies, but they're into nefarious things. And human trafficking is a delight to that ilk. Also, if you look at Bohemian Grove, which is a ritual sacrifice site in the middle of California, that's attended by all the bigwigs in the cabal, in the American cabal anyway. In England, I think they go to Stonehenge. But in the U.S., we go to Bohemian Grove. Now, in Bohemian Grove, they perform the ancient Canaanite cremation of care ceremony. Now, the cremation of care ceremony is designed to ensure financial success for the person who's practicing it for the next year. It ensures financial success for the ruling elite. In an ancient Canaanite, they would sacrifice babies, their firstborn babies. They would throw them into the fires. Now, these guys say they don't sacrifice babies. Whatever they're sacrificing seems to be working because they have continued financial success. And I think saying that they don't sacrifice babies is like Bill Clinton saying they did not inhale. I think that just use your own head on that particular issue. Now, the whole purpose of this video was to try to get you to realize what a slippery slope dehumanization is. We're a very noble species, very, I'd say exalted, but while at the same time being humble. We take care of one another and take care of those who can't take care of themselves. We're incredibly creative. And it's amazing. It's amazing the stuff that we've been able to put up with from the predatory overlords. Remember that the dehumanization can lead to horrible things. Sex slavery, that's really ramping up all over the world. Organ donors for transplants or Or how else would they use the organs? I don't know. We've got FEMA coffins. We've got the cover of the Economist magazine talking about organ transplants and organs separate from the body. MK Ultra slavery. There's all kind of things. It's a very slippery slope, and we're sliding into it faster and faster. So, just to end this video, realize that you're a noble species. Celebrate your uniqueness and take care of one another. Remember, labeling somebody the other just makes you less than you really need to be. So, take care of yourself and all those you encounter. Thank you very much. See you next time. Bye-bye.
For more information on the Hampstead case, please go to their website, hampsteadcoverup.com.